They say that love is the answer, that if you are good, generous, and available, the world will be fair to you. But the truth is that the world does not operate on sentimental promises. It responds to what you impose, not what you feel. Machiavelli understood this long before any modern relationship manual. He saw love not as weakness in itself, but as something that, when misplaced, opens the door to ruin. Because love without limits makes you predictable, and the predictable, sooner or later, is exploited. We live in a time where being too kind, forgiving too quickly, giving yourself away without criteria is seen as a virtue. But behind the noble appearance lies the most dangerous risk of all, that of becoming invisible within your own surrender. You love, therefore you expect care. But when love is offered as absolute, unfiltered, it ceases to be seen as a choice and becomes an obligation. That which is always given without resistance ceases to be valued. Machiavelli would laugh at the idea that deep bonds protect us. He knew that those closest to you are also those who know your blind spots best, and those who know you can pressure you. The problem is not your enemies. It is those closest to you who lose respect due to a lack of consequences. It is your friends who expect your loyalty without reciprocity. It is your partners who treat your patience as a given. You remain silent to keep the peace, but that peace comes at a cost. It numbs your dignity. And when someone feels comfortable with your weakness, they test it. Then they exploit it. And if you don't react, don't impose, don't back down, that relationship becomes a nonverbal contract of emotional submission. Machiavelli wasn't cold. He was strategic. He didn't order people to tear out hearts. He ordered them to protect them as a rare commodity, because he knew that once broken without response, they become open access to the chaos of others. Loving isn't the problem. Loving without criteria is. And no one survives emotionally without building a clear boundary between affection and position. If love has no barriers, neither will pain. So if you want to be truly respected, you need to learn something that most people never dare to say out loud. Not all love deserves a response, and not every approach deserves permanence. Human relationships are often silent tests. They are not driven by clear words or explicit agreements, but by boundaries that are gradually broken. Machiavelli understood with frightening accuracy that the most dangerous bonds are not born of declared hostility, but of disarming familiarity. It is those who know you best, who know your flaws, insecurities, and hesitations, who sooner or later use this to force an imbalance, not out of explicit malice, but because they have ceased to fear losing you. The absence of fear destroys respect. In a subtle, almost imperceptible way, the first test arises. The assumption that you will always be available. It is not said, but acted upon. They stop asking if everything is okay. They stop thanking you for being there. They believe that your help, your attention, and your loyalty are guaranteed. And when you finally set a limit, what you get is not understanding, but accusation. You have become hard, cold, selfish. But this reaction is not about you. It is about the loss of the advantage they had. Another test arises when you start saying no. Guilt is activated as a tool for emotional manipulation. Memories of the past are used to force regret. Subtle comments become emotional weapons. You weren't like this. You're so different. Because if they can instill guilt, they know they can control your decisions. With each retreat, they mentally note how to get to you again. This is not affection, it is calculation. Over time, a cycle emerges. You offer loyalty, understanding, presence. But when this commitment is not reciprocated, it becomes the norm. You become predictable. And when you walk away, There's no pain from the loss of connection, but panic at the loss of the stability you represented. You were their emotional safety net. Machiavelli knew predictable loyalty is the most exploitable. Perhaps the most insidious of all tests is the just this once. A small favor, an exception. You give in, but soon you realize that the exception has become the rule. And when you try to resist again, you hear that you've changed. It's a game of strategic pressure disguised as affection. Even your firmness is turned into a flaw. You're cold. You have a heart of stone. But they don't miss your warmth. They miss the unlimited access. Machiavelli teaches us that those who are very close to you expect you to absorb their chaos. And when you refuse, they accuse you of having changed. But change is what protects you. Because in the end, those who fear offending more than being offended become hostages to their own fragility. In this context, coldness is not an absence of affection, but strategic emotional protection. When you don't set filters, you become a receptacle for other people's emotional garbage. Machiavelli understood this with surgical clarity. It was not about building walls to keep the world out, but about installing filters to test who was worthy of entering and remaining. And no one passed without being reevaluated. Because love without criteria is not a virtue, it is a risk that takes a heavy toll on those who give everything and are then forgotten. The first unspoken rule of this type of emotional strength is that you don't have to justify your distance. You don't owe anyone an explanation for needing space, for keeping quiet, for saying no. Every explanation you give to someone who has already crossed your boundaries is a new opening for that person to renegotiate your value. Instead, you act. You change your frequency without warning, and when asked, you simply respond, "I recalibrated." This silence is uncomfortable, but it also commands respect, and it clearly exposes those who have never been able to respect your presence unless they had total access to it. Another essential principle is to replace conditions with consequences. Saying, "Don't talk to me like that," doesn't carry the same weight as simply walking away from the conversation. Disconnect. Disappear indefinitely. Machiavelli did not beg for respect. He structured his absence so that disrespect would be costly. Mistakes were punished with silence, not speeches. With distance, not promises of change. It's this kind of firmness that transforms your word into authority, not an emotional appeal. Emotion, when it becomes the main language of negotiation, also becomes a trap. Those who show a lack of control, despair in the face of silence, or cry under pressure, quickly cease to be seen as a thinking mind. They become a weak point, a tactic for manipulation. Machiavelli would never give that power to another. He teaches us, your emotional clarity is your shield. When it is pierced, the attack ceases to be logical. It becomes directed at your wounds, and there you lose the game before you even notice. Being cold is actually being slow to react, slow to trust, slow to reopen doors. Most people give everything away at once, afraid of appearing insensitive. But Machiavelli already knew the world interprets generosity as weakness when it is offered without discretion. Your silence, your pause, your absence, all these are reminders that your value is not up for grabs. And if one day they want your warmth, they will have to prove it with consistency, not with emotional appeals. Maintaining your non-negotiable boundaries is what prevents your mind and heart from becoming occupied territory. What you tolerate defines your value in the world, and Machiavelli would never tolerate being seen as predictable. Neither should you. This is where so many stumble. The desperate attempt to maintain sensitivity without giving up strength. Many are afraid that by becoming colder, They will lose their essence, their tenderness, their empathy. But what they don't realize is that being cold, in the Machiavellian sense, is not about stifling feelings. It's about shaping them with precision. You don't abandon your humanity. You just choose when, where, and to whom to reveal it. The warmth is still there, but now protected by a gate. And behind that gate, an inflexible rule. Only those who demonstrate consistency are allowed in. This emotional control is not emotional coldness. It is emotional intelligence in its purest form. It is the ability to look at betrayal, disappointment, or sudden estrangement, and not ask yourself, why did they do this to me? But what did this teach me about them? It's the transition from resentment to analysis, from wound to filter. Because those who feel everything all the time end up enslaved by the reactions of others. Machiavelli would never put himself in that position. The strategy begins within, in internal dialogue. It's when you transform anger into calculation, pain into observation, and abandonment into silence. A silence that is not empty, but rather discipline. The impulsive emotional response is what others expect. They expect you to cry, beg, explain yourself, react. But when you just back down, without fanfare, without justification, something changes. You become the one who saw everything, felt everything, but gave in to nothing. And that intimidates more than any outburst of anger ever could. A cool head is not indifferent, it is strategic. It does not act on impulse, it waits, it catalogs. And when it decides to cut, it does not warn you, it just closes the gate. There is no return based on excuses. There is only a return with new, concrete, consistent patterns. And if that is not offered, you have lost nothing. Because time is not a remedy for those who have never learned to change. Many people live as if they are emotionally at war, but they enter unarmed. They give their all hoping that the other person will notice, that they will come back, that they will change. But Machiavelli knew hope is not a method. It does not sustain relationships. And kindness without discipline is emotional suicide disguised as virtue. That's why you don't close your heart. You build a fortress around it. A fortress with gates that don't open with sweet words, but with proof of consistency. Your kindness isn't erased. It's elevated, refined, made selective. Because only those who know the weight of your care will know how to carry it responsibly. And that awareness is your ultimate protection against the emotional games of those who only value what they can exploit. The real difficulty in imposing limits lies not only in the act itself, but in the courage to be misunderstood. Many desire respect, emotional autonomy, a position of strength, but without giving up being seen as good, generous, loved. And that is exactly where they give in. Machiavelli already knew, if your evolution depends on the acceptance of others, you are not free. You are trading your freedom for approval. Being called cold, distant, or insensitive is the price of no longer being manipulable. When you stop justifying yourself, responding to emotional expectations, bending over backwards to preserve fragile bonds, your absence becomes uncomfortable. And it is in this discomfort that many will show who they really are. They don't miss you. They miss the ease with which they could access you. And that difference is everything. Machiavelli did not advocate insensitivity. He advocated empathy with strategy. You can still offer forgiveness, understanding, and acceptance, but only after asking yourself, am I acting out of maturity or neediness? Out of protection or guilt? If the answer is self-preservation, then you are on the right path. Returning to live with those who hurt you is not a mistake, as long as that return is conditional on real change. Not nostalgia, not neediness, but new standards. Your presence is also a tool. When used with precision, it makes an impression. You appear briefly, impose your standard, and withdraw. You don't need to leave in anger or return in fear. You're where you choose to be, and that is power. It is the difference between presence as an obligation and presence as a privilege. And if people still find your new kindness cold or transactional, accept it. Because giving unconditionally only seems noble until it is used against you. Emotional peace is not the absence of connection, it is conscious presence. You don't close doors, but now no one walks through them without showing that they have learned to take care of what they once had and wasted. True power does not announce itself. It reveals itself in consistency. When you set boundaries and maintain them without having to justify them, something changes in your dynamic with the world. People may call you cold, they may lament your distance, but they can no longer control you. And that is the point. Machiavelli did not debate his transformation. He just moved forward. And those who missed the old version, who gave in, who hesitated, can now only remember. Because access is not a right, it is a privilege that must be earned with each new cycle. The balance that many seek is not a line to be followed, but a filter to be installed. You don't have to harden yourself until you turn to stone. You need to become a mirror. Show people who they are when they cross your boundaries. Reflect others' behavior clearly and respond accurately. Your calmness is not apathy, it is self-control. Your coldness is not distance, it is structure. And structure requires habit. You no longer need to announce your emotional decisions, you just move. No long texts, no drama. Just selective presence, measured responses, and strategic absence. Your boundaries are not in words, they are in your rituals, in silent decisions, in firm cuts, in the time you don't explain, in the contact you don't resume. Be polite, but not available. Observe before reacting. Never reopen what has been closed without reevaluation. This is emotional posture. It is the end of fragility disguised as kindness. The beginning of a cycle where your peace no longer needs applause, just discipline. And those who didn't understand the reason for your absence don't deserve the depth of your return. That's how you build power, without having to prove yourself, without hurting yourself to be accepted. If this content touched you, brought you clarity, or helped you see patterns that were invisible, like the video, and if you believe that messages like this deserve to reach more people, consider leaving a donation. Any amount strengthens this work and allows deep and necessary content like this to continue being produced. Your help is essential to keep this voice alive. And to prove that you were here until the end, focused, write the word limit in the comments. That way, I'll know that you not only watched, but absorbed.